I spent more than 10 years at Fox News. I don't think I'm qualified to run the DOD whatsoever based on my time at Fox News.
I said that was one of the things.
If you, well, I don't think that's even a remote qualification. That's one.
Being able to communicate ideas as the Secretary of Defense and explain policy is actually a very big part of the job.
There are plenty of qualified Republicans out there who can run the DOD who also are good on television. It does not need to be Pete Hegseth. Secondly, again, you talked about NDAs. I am bound by an NDA at Fox News. If I were not bound by an NDA and if Fox News wanted to release me from that NDA, I could tell you about my time with Pete Hegseth. Unfortunately, that's not possible. But I will say that the reason that there are so many people who anonymously came forward at Fox News is that because they're also bound by confidentiality provisions, which 1/3 of all American workers need to sign on their first day of work. And if they were to go public, they could get sued.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Genuinely glad you are here for this one because this might be one of the most heated panel conversations we have covered in a while. So here is what you are walking into. Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host nominated to lead the entire United States Department of Defense, just sat through one of the most intense confirmation hearings in recent memory, and the panel brought together to debate whether he is the right man for the job did not hold back. Wajahat Ali comes in with a point-by-point breakdown that is hard to ignore. Julie Roginski drops something so personal and so specific that the room genuinely does not know how to respond, and the conservative side tries everything they have to push back, with results that are honestly something you need to see for yourself. And stay with this one all the way through because the moment that changes the entire conversation does not come early. It builds, and when it lands hard. Before we get into it, drop a comment and let me know where in the world you are watching from right now. Every single time I read through the comments and see how many different places this channel reaches, it genuinely makes my day. So tell me where you are from. All right, let us get into it.
Look, I know that Republicans actually like affirmative action because they're perfectly fine with mediocre MAGA men and lowering the standards to the point where Pete Hegseth, the Fox News host, can slither under it and be the Secretary of Defense. For people who don't know, the Secretary of Defense overlooks a budget of over $900 billion, 3 million people. He is responsible in particular for defense policymaking. We're talking about law and order, national security. You're going to give it to Pete Hegseth, a man who was in the National Army Guard. His fellow colleague in the Guard looked at his tattoos and actually reported him to be an insider threat because it was so extreme. This is a man who wrote a book called American Crusade. In his book, Pete Hegseth said, "I am too extreme for the U.S. military." In his book, Pete Hegseth said, "I support these militias, these paramilitary forces." In his book, he calls the enemies liberals extremists. So much for unity. This is a man, not just adultery, but sexual impropriety. He has been alleged of sexual impropriety and sexual assault. If he has nothing to hide, release the woman that he has signed to an NDA and paid off. Let her tell her story. This is a man whose own mother sent one of the most damning emails I have ever heard and read in my life. If your mother sends the email that Pete Hegseth's mother said you have failed in life, accusing him of being a sexual abuser, a man whose own Fox colleagues have said, allegedly in the New York Times, that they're worried about his alcoholism and alcohol problem, and a man who has economic impropriety allegations. He was released from 2 nonprofits. What are we doing here, Pierce? Listen, with Marco Rubio, I disagree with him. You don't see me here complaining. Qualified guy, intelligent guy, Secretary of State, fine. Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense, what are we doing? You guys are putting lipsticks on a pig and you're making America less safe. And the right wing in MAGA is doing this for Pete Hegseth.
Okay.
You're making this country less safe just because you're bending the knee to Donald Trump and he wants a lapdog who, by the way, I'll agree with Dave on this, who's good on TV.
Okay.
So that's what we're going to do. We're going to trade our national security for Pete Hegseth.
Okay.
Release the woman from the NDA. I want to hear from the woman. Secretary of Defense, let's defend women for Pete Hegseth.
You made your point.
That's my take.
You made your point. Any negatives while we're at it?
He works out.
It was a joke. It was a joke, Wajahat. It was a joke. It was a joke. You haven't actually taken that seriously. Let me bring Michael in here. I mean, look, a whole litany of stuff there, almost all of which was put to Pete Hegseth. I thought he actually batted away all of that stuff. We got a clip actually of him batting away one of them. Let's take a look.
All they were out to do, Mr. Chairman, was to destroy me. And why do they want to destroy me? Because I'm a change agent and a threat to them, because Donald Trump was willing to choose me, to empower me, to bring the Defense Department back to what it really should be, which is warfighting. So I'm willing to endure these attacks. But what I will do is stand up for the truth and for my reputation. False attacks, anonymous attacks, repeated ad nauseum, printed as nauseum, as facts. We have provided to the committee, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're going to share, on-the-record statement after on-the-record statement from people who have served with me, worked with me at Fox News, Concerned Vets, Vets for Freedom, you name it, from the top of the chain to the bottom, who will say, I treat them with respect, with kindness, with dignity. That's men, that's women, that's black, that's white, that's every background. I have prided myself as a leader of respecting people, being professional.
Michael, I thought that was quite an effective response, really, because a lot of it is just innuendo, hearsay, unsubstantiated allegation. Other stuff has been settled, as Wajahat says. That's not uncommon in America. It's incredibly common for people to do NDA settlements or whatever with no blame or liability attached. Where do you sit with this? I mean,
this is the moment that exposes everything, because Wajahat Ali did not come in with vague feelings or party talking points. He came in with a list, and not just any list, a specific, documented, sourced breakdown of why this particular nomination should have never made it this far. And here is what blows my mind. The argument from the other side kept coming back to one thing. He is good on television. That is the qualification they kept circling back to, being good on camera. For the person who would oversee a budget larger than most countries' entire economies and be responsible for millions of people in uniform. Wajahat said it perfectly. Republicans lowered the bar so far that someone could, in his words, slither under it. And that image stuck with me because that is exactly what this felt like watching it unfold. You have to understand what the Secretary of Defense actually does. This is not a media role. This is not a commentary position. The person in that seat makes decisions that determine whether American men and women come home alive. That is the weight of it. And when Wajahat pointed out that this man's own mother wrote what he described as one of the most damning emails he had ever read in his life, accusing her own son of being an abuser, the room should have gone silent. That is not opposition research. That is not a political hit job. That is a mother about her own child. And then we heard the clip of Pete Hegseth himself saying he was being attacked because he is, and I quote, a change agent and a threat. And here is where I want you to really think. Because that framing, I am being attacked because I am dangerous to the system, is one of the oldest deflection moves in political history. It reframes every legitimate question as persecution. It turns accountability into a conspiracy. And the moment someone uses that framing, you should ask yourself, what are they actually avoiding answering? Wajahat was not trying to destroy anyone. He was asking questions that anyone nominated for that position should be able to answer cleanly. The fact that those questions felt like destruction tells you something important about the answers.
It looks like Hegseth is going to get...
I don't know about you. That's not common.
Sorry?
That's not common, not for me. I don't know about you, but that's not common.
I'm not saying for you or me.
There's a police report where I sexually assaulted a woman and I signed her to an NDA.
In America, that kind of settlement is not uncommon, is my point. Just generally, in the American system, a lot of things get settled that way without any admission of liability or wrongdoing, which is the case with Pete Hegseth. Michael, where do you sit with this?
Well, so much of what Wajahat just said is not true, or as you point out, Pierce, is completely unsubstantiated, like the allegations that Pete Hegseth shows up drunk to work. Excuse me one second, Wajahat. I've been on that morning show with Pete a number of times. I've been in studio with him a number of times. The only thing you could accuse Pete of is being too alert and energetic. I found it overwhelming, actually, while I was there, tired, trying to dust the sand out of my eyes. But you suggest that the graduate of Princeton and Harvard, who for decades has been in the U.S. military, served his country honorably, that he's somehow unqualified to work at the Pentagon. The most egregious accusation you make against him, though, is that he's an extremist because he has a tattoo. Could you tell us what the tattoo is?
The tattoos specifically, I did not make the allegation that he's an extremist. It was actually
you
his
repeated the
fellow
allegation.
colleague
So what's the
who called
tattoo?
him as an insider threat.
Yeah, right. So what's the tattoo?
I can tell you. It says
it was his fellow
colleague. Let Wajahat answer, because Wajahat raised the tattoo. Wajahat, it's a fair question. What is this tattoo that you're so upset about?
It was his colleague. Wait. Two things.
Wajahat, hang on. Simple question. What is this tattoo that you're so upset about?
I wasn't the one upset about it. I was talking about his fellow colleague. This is exactly what I said. His fellow colleague.
Do you know what it was?
In the U.S. Army, called him out as a potential insider threat.
What is the tattoo?
The tattoos on his chest.
What is the tattoo?
Also, I called him an extremist based upon his own book. Read the book,
What
American
is the
Crusade,
tattoo?
his own words.
If you don't know what the tattoo is, just admit it.
Oh, my Lord. Listen,
would you
what is it?
What the tattoo is?
I want to, wait.
No, I'm genuinely intrigued. Do you know what it is or not, Wajahat?
We got a panelist.
Wajahat, do you know what it is or not?
She hasn't spoken yet. A woman hasn't spoken yet.
She's going to come. She's going to answer the question you're not answering. Final question to you, Wajahat.
I did answer it, but
final
chance.
I
got my colleague right here.
Be honest, Wajahat. Do you actually know what that tattoo is or not?
Listen, what I do know is I read his book, and in his book, if you read it, called American Crusade, in his book, wait a second.
Be honest.
His book.
Be honest.
I am. Look,
ironically,
you guys are putting lipstick on a pig,
no one's going to crucify you
bending
if you don't know the
Donald
answer.
Trump,
but do you know the answer?
Putting our national security at risk for Pete Hegseth. I am telling you everything, and you guys are finding ways to spin. Why are you guys okay with a man who has an NDA with a woman that he allegedly sexually assaulted?
Do you know what the tattoo is that you got so upset about?
It was his colleague. His colleague called him out as an insider threat, not me. His colleague.
Is a simple question.
And I also said, go to his book, read his words.
But just to be clear, Wajahat,
you haven't got Pete stuff.
Wajahat, you haven't got
from the U.S. military. Pete Hexeth's own words.
Why
are you
stop
okay
talking
with
for
that,
a moment.
Michael?
Wajahat, you don't know,
Michael, why are you guys okay with that?
You don't know,
literally in his book, American Crusade, he says he's too extreme for the U.S. military.
You don't know, do you?
Oh my gosh! All right, let's look it up right now.
I'd also love to know the names of some of the Fox colleagues.
Don't look it up. Let's go back to Michael. Michael, hang on, Michael. We gave him his chance. He obviously has no idea.
This segment is where the defense of this nomination collapsed in real time, and it collapsed in the most revealing way possible, not because someone made a great argument against it, but because the people defending it chose the wrong hill to die on. Michael Knowles decided that the most important thing to focus on, out of everything Wajahat raised, was whether Wajahat could name a specific tattoo. That was the move. That was the counter. Not the mother's email, not the NDA, not the removal from 2 nonprofits, the tattoo name, and here's why that matters more than it sounds. When you are defending someone against serious allegations, and your best response is a tattoo trivia question, you are not defending the person. You are performing confidence while hoping nobody notices you skipped the actual substance. Wajahat held his ground, but he correctly pointed out, multiple times, that it was not him who flagged the tattoos as concerning. It was a fellow soldier, someone who served alongside this man, looked at what he saw, and filed a report. That is not a liberal blogger. That is someone in the same unit making a professional judgment. And then Michael demanded Wajahat name the tattoo. Wajahat redirected to the book, to the man's own words, and Michael treated that redirect like a confession of ignorance. You have to understand what actually happened here. Wajahat said, read the book. Read what this man wrote about himself. And the response was essentially, but can you name the tattoo though? That is not a rebuttal. That is a distraction wearing a rebuttal's clothes. And then Piers Morgan, who was moderating, said it plainly. They gave Wajahat every chance to name it. And when Michael finally named it himself, a Jerusalem cross and a medieval Latin phrase, the conservatives celebrated like they had won something. What they actually did was hand Julie Roginski the exact ammunition she needed for what came next. Sometimes the people trying to defend a position are the ones who expose it the most.
Michael, what is the answer?
This falls along a threat as an insider threat.
I'm going back to Michael now.
2021 pegged Pete Hegseth as a potential insider.
You had 98 chances to answer and you failed the test. Sorry. I'm going to Michael. I'm going to Michael. Don't talk over each other. Michael.
The tattoo in question is called a Jerusalem cross. That this is a medieval Christian symbol, goes back a long time. In fact, at Jimmy Carter's funeral, there was a Jerusalem cross on the floor of the cathedral, and on the program for the funeral, there's one other tattoo that some have suggested could be extremist. It's the phrase Deus Vult, which is a medieval Christian slogan, a long traditional slogan that refers to God's will, and it goes back a long way. These are very traditional, very mainstream Christian symbols that not only are not extreme in any way, but which even the people who want to accuse him of extremism couldn't possibly name. That is pathetic.
All right.
Not really. His insider guardsman did it, which is what I said. And also I said that he called himself too extreme for the U.S. military in his book. That's pathetic.
Okay.
So is Pete Hegseth lying that he's too extreme in his book?
Let me go to Julie. He's been waiting.
He's too extreme for radical leftists.
Let me go to Julie. Let me go to Julie.
Is he lying?
Be gentlemanly, please. We have a lady who's not spoken. Julie, been waiting very patiently. Your view of this? I'll tell you what, before you answer, I know you said in your Substack about this, under normal circumstances, Pete Hegseth, would be precluded from serving in any leadership role. So explain why you said that.
Well, I will explain in 1 second. Let me go back to something that was said in the very beginning, that he spent more than 10 years at Fox News, and that's what qualifies him to be in this position that he wants to be in. I spent more than 10 years at Fox News. I don't think I'm qualified to run the DOD whatsoever based on my time at Fox News.
I said that was one of the things.
Well, I don't think that's even a remote qualification. That's one.
Being able to communicate ideas as the Secretary of Defense and explain policy is actually a very big part of the job.
There are plenty of qualified Republicans out there who can run the DOD who also are good on television. It does not need to be Pete Hegseth. Secondly, again, you talked about NDAs. I am bound by an NDA at Fox News. If I were not bound by an NDA and if Fox News wanted to release me from that NDA, I could tell you about my time with Pete Hegseth. Unfortunately, that's not possible. But I will say that the reason that there are so many people who anonymously came forward at Fox News is that because they're also bound by confidentiality provisions, which 1/3 of all American workers need to sign on their first day of work. And if they were to go public, they could get sued. The reason this accuser is not heard from is because, according to the New Yorker, she tried desperately to meet with Joni Ernst on the committee, and Joni Ernst turned her down. So the reason that she has not been able to come out publicly is because she has an NDA, and even privately, she could not meet with a senator on this committee who's also a rape survivor to share her story, because that rape survivor did not want to hear from a woman who was going to put her potentially in a position to vote against Pete Hegseth. Pete Hegseth has written himself while at Princeton, saying that women who are passed out, if you have sex with them while they're unconscious, that's not really rape. Right? Now, the American military has a tremendous sexual assault problem, a horrible sexual assault problem. I have spoken to women in the military who say on deployment, it's not a question of if, but a question of when they will be sexually assaulted. You cannot possibly have somebody running our military who has said that women who are unconscious deserve to be raped because it's not really rape. You can just go have your way with them. So I don't know which soldiers you've been talking to who think Pete Hegseth is a great thing for the military. There's not one woman out there who cares about being assaulted on deployment who thinks that this is the person that needs to be in charge of the United States military.
And this is where everything landed. This is the part of the debate that I keep coming back to, because Julie Rodzinski did something that almost nobody in political media does anymore. She made it personal, she made it credible, and she made it impossible to dismiss with a talking point. She did not come in swinging with statistics. She started with something simple. She said she spent more than 10 years at Fox News herself, and then she said, if Fox News released her from her own NDA, she could tell you things about her time with Pete Hegseth. She cannot, but she wanted you to know that she could. Now think about what that actually communicates. This is not an anonymous source. This is not a second-hand rumor passed through a journalist. This is someone sitting in that panel, on camera. I'm telling you directly, I have first-hand knowledge, and a legal agreement is the only thing standing between you and hearing it. That is a completely different category of claim, and the conservatives had no answer for it. Then Julie explained something that the broader conversation had been missing entirely. The woman who made allegations against Pete Hegseth tried to meet privately with a senator on the confirmation committee, not publicly, privately. She wanted to share her account behind closed doors, and she was turned away. A senator who is herself a survivor of violence chose not to hear from this woman, because hearing her story might have complicated a vote. Let that sit for a moment. The system that was supposed to create a space for that voice actively closed the door on it. But there is a documented pattern in military history of institutional protection overriding individual accountability. It happened for decades before the passage of the Military Justice Improvement Act became a serious conversation in Congress. The argument was always the same. Protect the institution, manage the narrative, handle it internally. Julie was pointing at that exact same pattern playing out in real time during a confirmation hearing, and then she closed with the line that I think defines this entire segment. She said there is not one woman serving in uniform who worries about being harmed on deployment, who looks at this situation and thinks this is the right person to be in charge of the United States military. That is not hyperbole. That is not partisan rage. That is a direct statement about trust. Yeah, and when the person at the top of a 2 million plus person institution has lost the trust of the people most vulnerable within it before they have even been confirmed, that is not a small thing. That is the entire argument, compressed into one sentence, by someone who had every reason to stay quiet and chose not to. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.